Hey guys, it's Mindi Linscombe, your host of the Something New show, where we like to talk about how to live a life worth celebrating. And I have a very special guest with us today. Her name is Julia Elliott. I want to call her Julia Elliott, but I know you're married now. Anyways, she's in my book. I've known her for a lifetime, it feels like. And so I love to call her maiden name, which has been a longtime friend of mine and a coworker, colleague, all the things. But before we get started, let me read to you what she's doing now. Julia Watson is a trauma-informed licensed professional counselor, certified in EMDR and DBT. Julia has built a thriving private practice over her 6 years of industry experience, and she works with young, established adults seeking wholeness and understanding in a range of issues from anxiety, depression, ADHD, to identity issues and attachment trauma. She's a native to Colorado, specifically Colorado Springs, and she loves spending time with her dog Jojo, reading and kicking her husband's booty at cards. You like beat him at card games? I didn't even know that was like something you loved. What card game do you play?
We have a long running game of cribbage, actually, which feels like an old person game, but it's fun because we just pick it up. You can keep it kind of rolling.
Keep it rolling. And who's winning?
And I am.
Of course. Of course.
It's like the one thing that I can beat him in. He beats me in everything else. So.
Okay. Well, I want to just give you guys some just background here that Julia and I met each other almost 20 years ago. And she was one of my first couple employees, and she was my first manager of my company. So this was like a long, long time ago. And I've always seen something super special in her. Like there's a bright light inside of her. She cares for people well. She has an amazing backdrop of different work experiences that she came to me with, one of which was managing the original Starbucks in Seattle, which is quite an impressive customer service additive to your resume there. And you came to me with no bridal experience and amazing customer service experience. So that was fine, because really what we do is we serve people. So I loved working with her, and just seeing her shine with taking care of people. Actually, she's a legend around our company, because one of the famous stories, and every company should have heritage stories about when they were early on in their business, but one of her heritage stories that we tell is that she sold a wedding dress over the phone to someone that was just calling to make an appointment, and they were just asking questions, and Julia made such a connection with them and made them feel so safe and comfortable that after a half hour on the phone with them, Julia was able to just say, I'm happy to help you with this. If you just want to order this over the phone, we can do that. And they ordered their dress over the phone.
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen. Never tried it on. I mean, truly amazing. The other memory that I love to talk about with Julia is, we were just talking about it in the back, is that one time I was ordering dresses and product over in Spain. And this is like your cell phone works internationally. Okay. And so there's no way to get hold of me. And we at the time did not have a POS system that was in the cloud. It was all on our our hosted hard drive on your computer in your store. So poor Julia comes to work the next morning. I'm in Spain, unreachable, and literally our devices had been struck by lightning. Our store had been struck by lightning that night. So she shows up, and literally everything's gone. Our whole POS system, every customer order, gone. Like, let's just say, suffice to say, now everything's cloud-based and online, because we never want that to happen again. But I still remember coming home to you and you being like, so... we don't have anything in our computer anymore. And we had to literally manually for months enter everything back into our computer database and start from the beginning. But like, you always did everything with a smile. You always did it with a positive attitude. And one of my favorite things about working with you is just that our ability to laugh. Like you and I can laugh about the most stressful things. And I miss that so much, Julia. Nobody quite does it like you. You're just so special when it comes to that. And I love when you can work alongside of people that actually can take the moments like they're serious. We understand the weight of them, but we can also say, okay, like this is life. Yes. Let's kind of just roll with the punches and not devastate our whole surroundings just because of a really terrible circumstance. Yes. But we can fix it. So, nobody died, and that was what was more important. So I loved our time together over the years, and I've loved seeing you grow. And I think it was actually in the dressing rooms with all of the brides telling you their stories that you decided you wanted to change careers, which is totally great. What did you decide like after those experiences?
Oh man. I think those experiences, it's such an intimate moment when you're in a dressing room with a bride, you're changing them in and out of dresses, and they just start talking to you and telling you their life stories. And some of it's beautiful and some of it's really hard and sad. And you're in this moment with them. And it just made me realize how much human connection changes things for people. And so that and a few other things kind of led me to pursue a master's in counseling, and I became a mental health therapist.
Yes. And now you are an expert in our town, in our area, and people look to you for support. And I think it's a beautiful thing to use like your gift of serving others and all those years of different, maybe the environment looked different, right? It was either around a coffee environment, or it was around dresses, or it was around, you name it. Yeah. But then now it's like, hey, I want to serve them for their heart, their head, get it all going together. So I think it's really a crucial time to talk about mental health. Yep. I think, I think COVID and those years were even escalating some of the things that were already in the fire. Like they were already happening, but it just kind of shined some light on maybe how people were really feeling. And so you've worked with a lot of, she's worked with a lot of teens and a lot of young professionals and even adults. Yep. So I think what we're going to get into today and what you want to talk about will apply to all. Absolutely. But also think about people in your relationship that this might apply to. So not just you, but also if you're a parent or if you are the teenager and other relationships that you might have. Because we have quite a span of listeners. And so I think just reminding them like some of the key things you're going to share, that this could help you in relationship, but also for yourself. For sure. So when you think about mental health, the topic that you really, really love and are like deep in the weeds on, what are some key things that you think we should be aware of, thinking about applying to our life? Yeah. I think one of the biggest conversations that I've found myself in over and over again, whether it's with my teenagers, whether it's with young adults, grown, established adults, it's this idea of our relationship with ourselves. And I think a lot of our culture, a lot of messages in the world teach us to look outwards, to connect outwards, and we forget what it means to actually be in a relationship with ourselves. And the reality is that our relationship with ourselves is our longest term relationship that we will ever have. And the power of what it looks like to be in relationship with ourselves actually shifts so deeply the way that you can be in relationship with other people, with your friends, with your kids, with your spouses, all of it. So how can we be in good relationship with ourselves? Yep. Well, that is a multifaceted question. I know. Give us some nuggets. I mean, like, where do we even start? Like, totally. And most people, when I'm talking about that, ask that is, how do I even do that? And I think the reality is often, how do you become friends with somebody else? You ask them questions. You spend time with them. You invest, and it's the same thing with ourselves, which sounds a little bit odd and tricky to be like, okay, so I talk to myself. But the reality is, I figured this out for myself when I got married, and my husband kept asking me, hey, what do you need right now? And I was like, I don't know what I need. How can I make you happy? Because I had been taught to make sure everybody else was good, everybody else was happy, and never realized that I actually had needs. I actually had the ability to say, hey, I'm really hungry right now, or hey, I just need 5 minutes to myself, or whatever the thing might be, because I'd never spent time with myself to actually ask myself the question of, what do you need, Julia? And so the reality is if you spend time with yourself and start to learn the nuances of who you are in the same way that your best friend or your spouse does, what would it look like to be able to actually get yourself what you need rather than waiting for somebody else to get you what you need?
And so I think it's really powerful when we get to say, hey, I'm not okay right now. I need something. And then get ourselves what we need.
So can you tell me just personally,
Yeah.
not what you tell your clients or whatever, but what are some things you do every week that are pretty regular? Like, I'm going to do this because I know it's a check-in or it's a response or whatever.
Totally. I often ask myself, like, hey, Julia, how you doing? Which, again, I know seems silly, but I have learned that I'm safe to answer and to say, I'm not okay. I feel really nervous, or I feel anxious today, or that was a really hard conversation. And to just
acknowledge,
name it, be with myself in it. And the longer that I've done that, the easier it is to kind of be in tune. And so I don't have to be so awkward and like, hey, Julia, how are you? So I take my husband and I go to the gym in the mornings. And then once he's off to work, I usually have a couple hours before I'm headed into work where I really do take time, whether it's sitting out on my back porch in the sun or just sitting on my couch with a book. Sometimes it's a journal, kind of depends on the day and what I need, but really just taking time to be with myself and to just spend, it can be 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be this big extensive thing.
Do you find now that you've done therapy and all of this for a while, do you find yourself not wanting to be with people as much? Like, do you need recharge time? Like, I'm just imagining social Julia, like very outgoing, everything else. I just can imagine that there are moments, and especially like I'm even thinking about people that work with a lot of people. Like you might be a counselor, but others listening might just be in a job that's very forward facing with others.
Yep.
And do you find that like, oh man, like even if I'm an outgoing person or an extrovert or whatever, that sometimes it's like the recovery time needs to be alone?
For sure. It's either alone or with really safe people. Because one of the tricks of my job is that I'm really outward facing, but nobody asks me about me. And so it's a lot of me pouring out to people, which is my job. It's
like you're
people aren't supposed to be.
You signed up for that.
Yeah, exactly.
You're happy.
I know that's what the expectation is.
Yes.
But I've learned over the years that it's really important for me to have really safe, good people in my life who are like, hey, how are you? How was your day? Asking me the questions, because it's so natural and easy for me to ask them questions and continue to pour out and pour into them, kind of a thing. So I've started to learn who are people that I could go straight from a long day at work straight into dinner with, versus what it looks like when I just need to come home and be quiet, sit with my dog, whatever that might look like.
Okay. And what are some of the things that you are, teaching as you have, like you said, a retreat, you have resources, you teach a parenting class for parents on how to parent teenagers. What are some things that you're teaching on?
Yeah. It feels like a little bit of a broken record, but I feel like whether it's parents of teens, whether it's a mental health retreat, I'm really teaching people on what it looks like to look inside themselves and look at what has happened in their world. So example, for a parent of a teen who's really frustrated with maybe an interaction that they had with their kid, oftentimes I'm asking them, what did that bring up in you? Like, I'm not worried about their kid and what actually happened with them, but what did that trigger inside of them? What does that tell them about their story? What happened to them when they were 17 or, things like that. And I think it's really powerful. So often we're frustrated with other people in our lives, but really it gives us information for us to look at ourselves and figure out what's going on in me. Why did I get so mad at that situation? Because in another situation, maybe I laughed, but right now I'm so mad. And so it takes having an awareness of ourselves and being able to say, here's what's going on with me. This is actually why I'm really mad at my kid, is because I was never allowed to feel angry when I was a kid. And so now I feel like they're not allowed to feel angry when they're a kid. And so then if a parent works on their stuff, then they can parent their child from a totally different space because they have the freedom and the connection with themselves to have room to hold their kids' emotions. So it's an example.
Yeah. And then do you feel like in the end, their end result that they were going for is a better relationship with their kid?
Absolutely.
Starts to make itself happen.
Yes. And that's the thing is, I love when teenagers come and sit on my couch, but I would rather that them and their parents actually create a deeper bond. Like, I don't want to be in the middle of that. Sure, I can help navigate those things, but at the end of the day, I want them to have a safe relationship. I want them to be able to be stronger in their communication and openness and things like that.
Because that's the long play.
Yes. And I see them 1 hour a week at best. They see them all the other hours of the day in the week, And so how can I equip them to have a stronger relationship?
And what are you seeing with young people right now? What is the biggest struggle? Like that you say every day, I'm like sitting hearing the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, as I've worked with business owners, I know what their struggles are. So I'm like, like you as a counselor, what are some of the struggles that people are coming into your office with?
There's a lot of anxiety right now. And I would say anxiety and depression are kind of some buzzwords that you see pretty often, but the reality...
What's the difference?
Ooh, great question. Anxiety takes you up, depression puts you down. So anxiety, you start to get overwhelmed and your thoughts start to spin out, and what if this happens, and what if this happens, and that kind of thing. Where depression, people kind of sink into a fog, and it's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to care about much. So those are, if you're high, you're usually dealing with anxiety. If you're super low, you're usually dealing with depression.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay. So people are coming in with those two things, and you were saying it's a buzzword, but it's actually kind of reality.
It's a buzzword, but it's reality. You can't miss the reality of what social media is providing people. There's a lot of good things, and there's a lot that kids are seeing that people have access to, and it's constant. And our brains weren't made to process that much information that fast, that constantly. And so we really are seeing a lot more things happening in people's brains that we haven't seen before, because our brains weren't wired to handle what our world currently looks like right now.
And all the imagery and like
news, headlines, all of it, And I've got 16-year-olds sitting on the couch talking to me about whatever news headline is out there. And I'm like, when I was 16, I didn't know what was going on in the world. And that made it a little bit easier because my world was small, and thank goodness, because
it would have been overwhelming.
Yeah. And when you're that age, you're just trying to figure out who you are, how you want to be in the world. You're kind of like awkward in your body, and life's hard as it is.
So now let's add all the world
Yes.
news to your,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm having conversations with younger people that I'm used to having with older people who are worried about bad things happening in the world. What happens if somebody that I love dies? Those conversations, which are a reality for all of us, but I'm not used to having those conversations with 15-year-olds, and I am right now. So it's just a really interesting world to live in. And I think you're right. COVID really opened things up because it kept people in. It kept people...
all you were is alone with your thoughts.
Yeah. It kept people so disconnected from relationships. And I think,
right.
relationships are so key, whether it's with our friends, ourselves, our loved ones, whatever. Relationship is how we exist in the world.
I'm just thinking about what advice, as I have teenagers.
Yeah.
I don't want to totally, put a bubble around them when I think of social media and all that other stuff. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, so what's the appropriate amount of kind of letting them experience some of it while they're still under your roof, but then not being overwhelmed by it either?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's tricky because I don't think there's a good formula for it, but I think your job as a parent is to know your kids. And so one of your kids might be able to handle something totally different than your other kids, and it's your job to kind of know the difference. And I think that's one of the hardest jobs about parenting is you have to be, for you with 4 kids, you have to be 4 different versions of yourself, which is ultimately impossible because you are one person.
Yeah.
And yet all 4 of your kiddos need something totally different from you in any moment of any day.
Thank you for recognizing that. Yes. Isn't that the truth? I'm feeling so seen right now. No, but it's a challenge. And then just saying, I want to be the best parent I can, but honestly, I screw up all the time.
Totally. And I think that is actually to your kids' benefit. because you cannot be perfect, or else your kid's just going to keep expecting you to be perfect. And so you screwing up and then repairing with your kid is actually so much more beautiful of a process, because that's the reality of life, right? Like, we mess up, we break trust in a relationship, and then we have to come back and repair it.
So how, like, give us some, like, this is the best way to repair.
Oh gosh.
Just, I mean, a simple, I'm sorry, but I'm also imagining there's more.
Sure. Because I'm sorry. I don't know. That can mean some things and it might not. But I think owning what we did is really, really important, because that's what we're responsible for. Like, you as a mom, you as a human are responsible for your actions, for the words you speak, for the feelings that you experience in your body. Those are the only responsibilities that you have in the world. Everything kind of falls under those three things.
Say them again.
Yep. The choices you make. Behaviors.
Okay. I have a funny story really quick. We're going to go off topic for a second, because we used to have team members. When she was a manager, we'd have team members show up, for work, hungover or tired or whatever. And Julia just didn't even want to know. She'd go, PCs. She'd say PCs and walk away.
Personal choices,
choices. So she didn't care. She didn't feel bad for them. And I love it. And I still use it today. Sometimes when the girls are like, wah, about their life or whatever. And like they're coming to work and, all the things. And I just hear Julia in the back of my mind going like this, PCs. Anyways. Okay. So back to your three personal choices.
The words you speak and the feelings that you have. The feelings part is really tricky, because a lot of people don't believe that you can choose feelings. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. There's a little nuance there. We'll leave that one for another day.
You're like, that's a whole nother episode.
We just won't even worry about that one today. But I think it's so important to recognize we get to choose the words that we speak and the choices that we make. And we have to own that. Those are all reflections of what's going on inside of us.
So saying that to your kid or your spouse or whatever, saying like, this is where I went wrong, and saying it out loud.
Totally. And saying, hey, I should not have said those words to you. It doesn't mean I'm not mad, but I shouldn't have said it that way. And that goes a long way, because then that you own your piece. And that often invites somebody to say, Mom, I shouldn't have done that either. I'm really sorry that I had an attitude with you, whatever the thing might be. So owning what you did, apologizing, and then connecting, and saying, what's a way we could handle this better next time? Because then you kind of create a game plan, and then you're on the same team, and then you've built foundation to then, the next time something happens, being like, all right, bud, we said we were going to do this when this happened. So, and then there's kind of this common ground that you guys are working
respect
from.
Mutually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's actually really, really important. I'm glad you said that. Respect is really, really tricky, I think, with kids. But the truth is that in order to teach kids respect, we have to respect them and model what it looks like to respect them as a human.
And I would imagine that you have a lot of teenagers frustrated that they feel as though they're not respected.
Yeah. And I would say especially these generations that are coming up. Yep. That's a really, really big piece.
They just want their voice to be heard. I mean, how can you show respect even if you disagree?
Yeah. Ooh, such a great question.
Hey, I love asking good questions. Okay.
No, it's good. I think one of the consistent conversations I have with parents is validation is not justification. Acknowledging somebody does not mean that you agree with them. And so you can say, wow, I see how you felt. Doesn't mean I'm okay with the behavior that you chose, but I see what was going on there and I see you in it, and I think the number one desire for all humans is to be seen / understood. But I think we feel
loved,
something like that too. But I think when we feel seen, when we feel understood, we feel loved.
Totally.
So they all go hand in hand together. Yeah. And so I think just, there's a lot of kind of big hitting topics happening in the world right now, and especially conversations that kids are having, young kids are having. And some of that I think makes parents really, really uncomfortable because they haven't had those conversations with their kids yet. And so some of it is about, saying, I don't know if I agree with that, but like, I see you. I see that y'all had that conversation, at recess today.
Yeah, no, it's real.
And
my favorite thing to do, and I learned this from my parents, but is when I have an opposing viewpoint, is to more ask the question and not require an answer.
Yeah.
But have you thought about fill in the blank?
Totally.
Just to get them thinking about maybe an alternative way to see something. And then I just leave it. Because my dad used to always do that to me, and then he'd walk away, and I was like, oh, well, now you totally messed with my thinking, and now I haven't.
No, I haven't.
No, I haven't. I mean, when I first started my business back in the day, and you were working for me, I remember my dad asking me, so, how many appointments have you had? What's your sales like? What are your numbers? How much are you running in inventory? And I was like, I don't know. Even your dad was asking me.
I'm sure.
Cause he's a nice little
finance
CFO.
guy,
Yeah. He was a finance guy, and I'd run into him, and he'd be like, so how are sales? Like, have you been up this %, or what's the, and I was like, first year I was kind of like, I don't know. I didn't know anything. But what was so great about both of our dads asking questions like that is it got my wheels spinning about, like, these are probably things I should know or should be like rattling off the tip of my tongue or should think more clearly about. And when I apply that to parenting now, it's not so much about numbers, but I loved the questions that they would ask and then walk away, leaving me to wonder, perhaps there's a different way about this or a different way that I've thought about it. And now I'm going to just maybe do a little bit more digging instead of just having an opinion.
And also it's asking you to actually figure out what you think about it. Not telling you what is the right thing to think about it, but you get to decide what you think, how you feel about
whatever it might be.
Whatever the thing might be,
Well, and what do you think about, let's just talk about faith for a minute. How would you say, I mean, I'm parenting. I know you're not a parent, but you work with these dynamics of parents and kids. How would you say to foster a good, healthy relationship with faith and, self discovery and belief, while also kind of trying to teach your values in a healthy dynamic? Because I mean, you and I have both seen it done a million different ways. And I really want my kids to grow up choosing their faith. I mean, obviously I have a standpoint where I believe, and I'm teaching them my beliefs, but I also want them to, if they choose that, to believe it because they believe it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, and helping them know that they have that's your desire, you know, to not say like, this is what we believe because this is what I believe, but to say, what do you think about that? I'm curious what that Bible story made you think about, or I think fostering the questions and creating a culture of curiosity is really, really powerful, even within the faith spectrum of being able to, it continues to build your relationship with your kids.
Like, ask questions. It's fine.
Exactly.
We can go to the hard spaces.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would say I'm not an overtly faith-based counselor, but I utilize my beliefs in the work that I do. And so I feel really confident that the things that I'm teaching people actually are biblical. And so it's fun to be able to connect with somebody who does not hold a faith and be able to fully believe and know that what I'm speaking to them is true. And also see somebody who does have a faith and be able to say, hey, like, this is actually what God said. This is what Jesus lived out. And so it's fun to be able to really know that what we're communicating to people is just true, not because of one way or the other, but because it's true for humans in the world,
like the principles of everything. Yep. It's like it's a good foundation. I just don't want, my goal is to like parent great people that contribute to the community, that feel comfortable in their own skin. Enjoy others' company and do something they're really passionate about with their life, right? And so what's interesting is trying to create a fostering, like, positive environment where you let your kids fall enough so that you're there to walk them through the painful pickups.
Yes.
And not like protect them from the fall. So like some people think I'm like too relaxed as a parent sometimes. They're like, you know, your kid's over there in the pool. And I'm like, yeah, he'll be fine. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I totally let my kids, I mean, obviously I'm not going to let them drown, but I let my kids like get skinned up and get hurt. And also, you know, have relationship intricacies that I'm like, okay, that might not go so well for you. Yeah. But at the same time, I love it because there's enough trust there for them to come back and like we talk it through.
Yes.
Instead of preventing them from the pain, because honestly, I feel like, Julia, the pain's inevitable. Like 100%. They're going to have pain. So I'm kind of like, why am I trying to withhold pain from them until they're 18?
Right.
like let's walk through it together at least and talk through and cry a little bit together and let me listen and be a sounding board for you.
Yeah.
Because I think that I could be a great sounding board for this season because eventually I won't be there. No,
and they need to know how to do that. And you have to show them. Like, you're the example of what it means to do all of those things that you want for them, you know, living out a passionate life, the way you treat people, the values that you hold. And the only way you can do that is to figure it out. And that means you mess up. And that means you do something and you're like, oh, I didn't like that. I didn't want to do that. And we have to do that in order to find the space that we're like, yes, this is who I am. This is who I want to be in the world.
Well, and I totally tell them when I'm having a hard day.
Good.
Like, I'm like, I'll come home and it was like the worst day at work. And I'm like, I'm having the hardest day. Mom's just like not happy right now. Yes. I'll tell them. I also have not shied away from disagreements with my spouse in front of my children. I mean, they see it. And I was like, I just want you to know this is real life. Like, people don't, I said, I absolutely love your dad, but we don't always agree. Oh. And that's totally okay. Like, but I make them feel safe. Like, we're committed to each other. We're not going anywhere. Yep. But yet they do see us disagree. And then it's funny because now my teenager will be like, I totally agreed with you on that one, Mom. Thanks. And I'm like, no, you can't do that yet. You know, like, I'm not trying to help them pick sides or anything like that. Yeah. But it is kind of funny as they witness it. But I think to create healthy people, and to be healthy people, I think what you're saying is just like, you have to talk about it out loud. You have to be really transparent about it, not shy away from the awkward conversations.
Exactly. And you're also teaching your kids good intuition, because I bet you anything, you walk in at the end of the day and they're like, oh no, like their gut's like, oh, Mom's not okay. You know?
For sure.
And so, but then, so what often happens though, what often happens is somebody will be like, Mom, are you okay? And a mom might be like, yeah, I'm fine. And then that teaches the kid, oh wait, maybe I read that wrong, even though Mom's not fine. And so it's beautiful that you're like, nope, it was a really rough day, you know, whatever. And then you just move on. Like, it doesn't even have to be a thing, but at least you're showing them.
Do you feel like some people are almost in a way faking it? Like, not.
Oh, totally.
Like, do you see that in your counseling?
100%.
Like, what do you see?
Absolutely. So, I mean, so often parents don't want to burden their kids with what's going on or things like that. Like, it all likely comes from a really good place in their heart. But the reality is that when your kid's like, hey, Mom, are you okay? And they're like, no, I'm fine, or whatever, even if they don't want to talk about it, it teaches their kiddo that they read the situation wrong. And so then that teaches the kid to not trust their gut on a situation, when actually that's like life and death. They need to trust their gut. And so by you saying it was a rough day, and you don't have to get into it, whatever, it teaches the kid, okay, read that right.
Well, and I also think about parents that are maybe having marriage problems and their kids are they see it.
Absolutely.
But they don't say it.
Yep.
And then they fake it.
Yep.
And like, we're fine.
Yep.
That doesn't help anybody.
No, not at all. And I think, again, it's like, if we're just honest and we kind of name what's going on, like, yeah, Dad and I had a rough conversation. We're good, but that's probably what you're feeling. That's probably what you're noticing. Energy in the house or whatever.
What if they're not good?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think you can say that. Yeah, Dad and I are in a rough spot right now, but we want you to know that we really love you, and we're going to figure it out, and we're committed to you and our family. Things like that, you know. You can still be honest without saying like, your dad and I are in a terrible spot and we're probably going to get a divorce. Like, you don't have to do
again,
that.
That's the overload. So now you crossed over the overloading them with something like the news,
which is not their responsibility to navigate through.
Yes. Yeah. So that's probably the filter right there, is to not overload your children or your friends or family, whatever, with things that they're not ready to navigate because you might not even have an answer for it yet either. So
absolutely.
End of the world or whatever.
Totally.
war or whatever. It's like, you can be like, okay, well, like we don't have a response for that yet. So let's not even necessarily dive into like strategy planning because right now we're here.
Right. When I tell people all the time, you know, cause they're like, well, I don't want to talk about it. So I don't like, what am I supposed to say? And I tell them, you say, hey, I'm not okay, but I don't want to talk about it right now. Like, just say it. You put out a boundary, and somebody who respects it is somebody that's worthy of your time and your care.
Would you say that it's important to stop everything when somebody is ready to talk about something?
I feel like that's probably situational.
Okay.
Depending. Like, if we're trying to get out the door to go somewhere to whatever, like,
this might not be the time.
Can you take 2 minutes? Maybe. Or can you take 2 minutes and say, hey, bud, we don't have time right now because we got to get to Grandma and Grandpa's for dinner. But let's take some time at the end of the night. And I really want to sit down and talk with you about this because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what's going on inside of you. So if you can't do it in that moment, maybe create a time so that they know
it's coming.
It's coming. She's not going to forget about it. I'm going to trust that we can do this.
It's coming. Okay. Wrapping up here, I just want you to think about living a life worth celebrating.
Yeah. I
know we went kind of into the deep weeds of mental health, but like just in general, what is something that Julia Elliott, I'm sorry, back to your mate, I have to call you that. What is something that you would tell all your best friends, you know, let's say they're all the people listening to the show. It's like, hey, let's live a good life worth celebrating. Like, let's do this. Like, what would be your wrap it up? Hey guys,
this is the way to do it. I think that I would deeply encourage people in their relationship with themselves. My life has exponentially brightened and grown since I've chosen to do that. And it's changed everything for me. And that's why I believe that it's so important for other people is to really connect with themselves. Because when you believe that you're worthy and loved by you, then it's a whole lot easier to believe that you're worthy and loved by other people. And then you can go and love well too, you know? And so I think it's such a powerful space. I tell my friends, I tell my husband all the time, like, how are you doing with you? What do you think about you? Here's what I think about you, but it doesn't totally matter what I think about you. What do you think about you? You know? And then when we spend that time with ourselves, then we love other people really, really well, which is what I think a lot of us want to do. You want to be an amazing mom to your kids. You want to be an amazing spouse to your husband. Like, you want to love your girls and your staff and the people who walk in the store so, so well. And you can't do that when you're empty, you know? So that's what I have found to really be the game changer for me and what is making this life really beautiful for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, we like to end the show with our favorite beverage. And I love getting your favorite beverage because I feel like you've tried everything out there. So tell me, Julia, what are we having today for your favorite drink?
I'm just doing a black iced coffee.
And is this your like go-to?
It really is my go-to. I used to drink coffee with lots of things in it, but then I got really frustrated because I would go places and I couldn't get the things that I wanted. And I wanted my drink the way I wanted my drink.
What would have been something that you would order?
Like almond milk or a certain type of sweetener or things like that. And in a different career in my life, I traveled overseas a fair bit, and you can't really get like good fancy coffee in like the backwoods of Uganda, even though that's where a lot of coffee comes from.
Right.
And so I just started, well, there were some moments where it wasn't any other option but to drink coffee black, but I really have established a palate to really love
black coffee.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite bean? Do you have a favorite, like, what do you drink at home?
I change it up, but so Starbucks roasts all of their beans dark. I know everybody has like an issue with that, but that's why you get the same flavor no matter where you are in the world, because they roast their beans to the same level all the time. When you get to the fancy coffee shops, they are roasting their beans at a lighter roast, and so you actually get more of the flavor out of it. So when you have like a medium or a light roast, that's when you start to taste like the fruity flavors from the coffee beans or the type of soil that they're grown in. There's like such a science behind it all. Mm-hmm. I knew it all at one point in time.
I want to know, because manager of the original Starbucks in Seattle. Okay, what's something that you learned from Starbucks, like in that short time there? I know that it wasn't like your long career, but you were there.
Yeah.
What's something you learned?
Something that I really loved about Starbucks is they cared for their people so well.
The staff?
They're like,
is that what you mean by their people?
I mean,
or do you mean the guests?
I would say, nope. I actually mean like their farmers and people that they got their coffee beans from, all of that. So they provide health insurance for all of their farmers that they get beans from. At least when I worked there, they did. Maybe they don't anymore. I don't know.
But back in the day,
they like provided so much. And there was a really big price tag on being able to label your coffee beans fair trade. And so a lot of Starbucks coffee at the time, don't quote me, was not fair trade. But that's because Starbucks said, hey, we don't want you to pay a whole bunch of money that you don't have when you're trying to provide for your family. So please grow your beans to this level and use, there's all these like, you have to do this and you have to do that in order for your coffee to be fair trade. So they would ask their farmers to meet all those levels without requiring them to have the stamp of fair trade on it. And so I just thought it was cool the way that they cared. Like,
we did not even talk about all your fair trade experience.
I know.
She worked in retail and worked with products around the country and around the world, really.
Yeah.
Really as an ambassador of fair trade products. So that's a whole nother lifetime of yours. You have so much knowledge.
All these random places.
I love it. But I mean, that is really cool. And honestly, it was a lot of part of my whole starting my own product line myself is saying I want to have my own collection to give back to great causes like that. So I think that's what's really unique about our company. I love when companies can have a cause benefit to it as well. So
absolutely.
Well, let's cheers, because this was a great conversation. And Julia, I loved having you on the show today. Let me try your favorite drink. Cheers.
Let's see how it is.
Ooh, that's strong. That is definitely an acquired
good little kick
trait. That is an acquired, like you have to learn to like that.
Yes.
Dark coffee
this is
with
true.
nothing in it.
I did not start out liking this.
I was like, woo, you are a fine wine kind of girl with your coffee. I love it. Well, that was so special to deep dive into some of those really meaningful things going on in our world, in our loved ones' hearts and minds. And then also just to kind of go back into some of our stories, because it's so amazing how story just kind of plays a part of all of life. So if you like this, definitely hit like, subscribe, leave a comment below. We'd love to have you and your friends come along this journey with us as we learn how to live a life worth celebrating. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the show, rate, review, and share with a friend. Also, follow the Something New Show on Instagram and Facebook. If you want a fuller experience, watch the show on YouTube to help you create a life worth celebrating.